Hello, this is Ben Television News Roundup, a compilation of major stories in the weekend. And I'm Tunde Alabi. Thank you for being part of the program today. Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn has criticized the government for cuts to NHS funding. Mr. Corbyn said that the cuts have led to mental health patients being taken to police cells. However, the Prime Minister Theresa May said that the government has increased funding to the NHS and will be spending £500 billion in the course of the current Parliament.
It's left to the underfunded police forces to deal with the consequence of this crisis. Indeed, the Chief Constable of Devon and Cornwall has this month threatened legal action against the NHS because he's forced to hold people with mental conditions in police cells because there aren't enough NHS beds. I simply ask the Prime Minister this: if the government is truly committed to parity of esteem, why is this trust and so many others facing an acute financial crisis at the present time?
Prime Minister.
Can I first of all say to Colin that I think we all in this House recognise the difficulty that people have when they are coping with mental health problems, and can I commend those in this House who have been prepared to stand up and refer to their own mental health problems. I think that's been a very important signal to people with mental health issues across the country. He raises the whole question of the interaction between the NHS and police forces. I'm very proud of the fact that when I was Home Secretary, I actually worked with the Department of Health to bring a change to the way in which police forces were dealing with people in mental health crisis, so that we do see those triage pilots out on the streets. We do see better NHS support being given to police forces. So the number of people who are having to be taken to a police cell as a place of safety in some areas has come, overall I think it's more than halved. In some areas it's come down by even more than that. This is a result of the action that this government has taken.
Jeremy Corbyn.
Mr. Speaker, the reality is that nobody with a mental health condition should ever be taken to a police cell. They should be supported in the proper way. And I do commend those police and crime commissioners that have managed to end that practice in their areas. But the reality is, it's not just Devon and Cornwall that are suffering cuts. Norfolk and Suffolk Mental Health Trust has had a cut for every one of its last 3 years. And I also agree with the Prime Minister that members of this House standing up and openly discussing mental health issues they've had is a very good thing, because we do need to end the stigma surrounding mental health conditions across the whole country. But NHS trusts are in a financial crisis. According to NHS providers, it seems to be the worst financial crisis in NHS history. 80% of acute hospitals now in deficit. There was a time in 2010 when the NHS was in surplus. What's happened?
Prime Minister.
Remind the right honourable gentleman that what has happened in relation to funding of the NHS is precisely this. We asked the NHS themselves to come up with their 5-year plan. We asked the NHS themselves to say what extra funding was needed to deliver on that. They came up with their 5-year plan, led by Simon Stevens as Chief Executive of the NHS. He said it was £8 billion that was needed. We're giving £10 billion of extra funding to the NHS. And I might remind the right honourable gentleman that at the last election, it wasn't the Conservative Party that was refusing to guarantee funding for the NHS, it was the Labour Party.
Mr. Speaker, in 6 years the NHS has gone from surplus to the worst crisis in its history. £3 billion was wasted on a top-down reorganisation that nobody wanted. And yesterday at the Select Committee, Simon Stevens made it very clear he doesn't believe that NHS England has enough money to get through the crisis it's facing. And so, can I offer an analysis from the Care Quality Commission, which seem to have quite a good grasp of what's going on? They say that cuts to adult social care, and I quote, translating to increased accident and emergency attendances, emergency admissions and delays to people leaving hospital, which in turn is affecting the ability of a growing number of trusts to meet their performance and financial targets. Will the Prime Minister also address the reckless and counterproductive adult social care cuts that have been made by her predecessor?
Yes. Prime Minister.
The right honourable gentleman quotes Simon Stevens, the Chief Executive of NHS England, at the time of the autumn statement last November. He said, "Our case for the NHS has been heard and actively supported." Now, the right honourable gentleman raises the whole question of social care and the interaction between health and social care. Over £5 billion extra was put into the Better Care Fund precisely to deal with these issues. Local authorities are able to raise that 2% of council tax to deal with social care costs that they are facing. But what is important is actually the health service and local authorities working together to ensure they are delivering the best possible service for people who require that social care. I saw a very good example of that at Salford Royal on Monday. I want to see more examples of that across the National Health Service, delivering for patients. We've put the funding in. His party wouldn't have done that. They will see better care for patients.
We all want local government and the NHS to work closely together, but the problem is that local government funding has been cut. 400,000 fewer people are receiving publicly funded social care as a result of that. The NHS is having difficulty coping with the crisis they're in. Therefore, there is, unfortunately, bed blocking where acute patients cannot leave because there's no social care available for them somewhere down the line. The issue is the funding crisis in the NHS and in local government. The published figures by the NHS Trust show that the total deficit is £2.45 billion, but the Chief Executive says this figure may even be bigger. The government disguises the extent of the crisis through temporary bailouts, and next month they are bailing out trusts in a crisis. That, of course, is a good thing, but why are they in a crisis in the first place? Next month, Mr. Speaker, sustainability and transformation plans are going to be published. Many all over the country are quite alarmed by this, because of the threat to accident and emergency departments. Can the Prime Minister deal with this issue now by quite simply saying there will be no downgrades and no closures of A&E departments in the statement coming out next month?
I say to the right honourable gentleman, over the course of this Parliament, the government will be spending over £500 billion on the National Health Service. That is a record level of investment in our National Health Service. But there is a key difference between the way that he approaches this and the way that I approach it. We believe on this side of the House that at local level people should be able to make decisions about the National Health Service, that decisions about the National Health Service should be led by clinicians, that it shouldn't be a top-down approach which is typical of the Labour Party.
Jeremy Corbyn!
Wow, Mr. Speaker. Well, top-down is what we got. And it cost £3 billion for a reorganisation that nobody wanted at all. Mr. Speaker, I started by asking the Prime Minister about parity of esteem. All this government's produced is parity of failure. Failing mental health patients, failing elderly people who need social care, failing the 4 million on the NHS waiting list, failing 5 times as many people waiting more than 4 hours at A&E departments, and another winter crisis is looming. The Society of Acute Medicines, I believe, has it right when it says this funding crisis and the local government funding crisis is leaving the NHS on its knees.
Prime Minister.
What has happened in the NHS over the last 6 years? More patients being treated, more calls to the ambulance service, more operations, more doctors, more nurses. That's what's been happening in the NHS. But let's just look at what his party's approach to the National Health Service is. A former Shadow Health Secretary said it would be irresponsible to put more money into the National Health Service. A former leader of the Labour Party wanted to weaponise the National Health Service. At every election, The Labour Party claims that the Conservatives will cut the NHS spending. After every election, we increase NHS spending. At every election, Labour claim that the Tories will privatise the NHS. At every election in government, we have protected the NHS. There's only one party that has cut funding for the NHS, the Labour Party in Wales.
President Barack Obama has highlighted the achievement of his government in the last 8 years, from inheriting an economy in recession to creating record high jobs in the private sector, an increased wage rise, and a strong economy. Challenging the U.S. Congress to set aside politics and support government's policy, President Obama said a lot still needs to be done to support the growth of the middle class.
8 years ago, we were in the early stages of what would become the worst economic crisis of our lifetimes. It was a scary time. We didn't even know where the bottom would be. But thanks to your hard work and your determination and some smart decisions we made, today's a different story. We turned a recession into a record streak of job growth, creating more than 15 million new private sector jobs and cutting the unemployment rate in half. Getting wages to rise again was a harder task. Even before the recession, working Americans faced decades of slow wage growth. Between 1980 and 2007, real wages barely grew each year. But because the policies we put in place are working families are finally seeing their wages and incomes rise too. Since 2012, wages have grown around 20 times faster than they did over the almost 3 decades between 1980 and 2007. Last year, folks' typical household income rose by $2,800. That's the single biggest increase on record. And across every race and age group in America, incomes rose and poverty rates fell. We lifted 3.5 million people out of poverty, the largest one-year drop in the poverty rate since 1968. What's more, lower and middle-income families saw the biggest boost in incomes, in part because 18 states and the district, as well as more than 50 communities, have given millions of Americans a raise by raising the minimum wage. And states that have raised their minimum wage have seen stronger earnings growth in low-wage jobs compared to states that have not. Strengthening benefits at work helps too. Last week, for example, I took action to make sure up to 1 million more workers can earn 7 days of paid sick leave on the job. We're also helping states expand opportunities for workers to save for retirement. But there's a lot more we should do to strengthen the middle class and help more Americans get ahead. Making childcare more affordable, for example. Making sure women earn equal pay for equal work. Guaranteeing paid family and sick leave. Increasing the federal minimum wage. Preparing workers for the jobs of the future, and closing tax loopholes that benefit just the wealthy and big corporations. And we just need a Congress that cares about these issues, one that will finally put politics aside and act on these common sense ideas. That's how we'll build on the progress we've made over these past 8 years and achieve one thing we should all agree on: securing a brighter future for all of our children. Thanks, everybody, and have a great weekend.
Meanwhile, President Obama has praised America's leading role in science, technology, and innovation. The U.S. president was at the White House Frontiers Conference, where he assured America that government will continue to invest in innovations that will benefit America and the world.
Hi, everybody. On Thursday, I traveled to Pittsburgh for the White House Frontiers Conference, where some of America's leading minds came together to talk about how we can empower our people through science to lead our communities, our country, and our world into tomorrow. Plus, we had some fun. I had a chance to fly a space flight simulator where I docked a capsule on the International Space Station. I met a young man who'd been paralyzed for more than a decade, but thanks to breakthrough brain implants, today he can not only move a prosthetic arm, but actually feel with the fingers. It's awe-inspiring stuff, and it shows how investing in science and technology spurs our country towards new jobs and new industries. new discoveries that improve and save lives. That's always been our country's story, from a founding father with an idea to fly a kite in a thunderstorm, to the women who solved the equations to take us into space, to the engineers who brought us the internet. Innovation is in our DNA, and today we need it more than ever to solve the challenges we face. Only through science can we cure diseases and save the only planet we've got, and ensure that America keeps its competitive advantages as the world's most innovative economy. And that's why it's so backward when some folks choose to stick their heads in the sand about basic scientific facts. It's not just that they're saying that climate change is a hoax or trotting out a snowball on the Senate floor. It's that they're also doing everything they can to gut funding for research and development, the kinds of investments that brought us breakthroughs like GPS and MRIs and put Siri on our smartphones. That's not who we are. Remember, 60 years ago when the Russians beat us into space, we didn't deny Sputnik was up there. We didn't haggle over the facts or shrink our R&D budget. No, we built a space program almost overnight and beat them to the moon. And then we kept going, becoming the first country to take an up-close look at every planet in the solar system too. That's who we are. And that's why in my first inaugural address, I vowed to return science to its rightful place. It's why in our first few months, we made the largest single investment in basic research in our history. And it's why over the last 8 years, we've modernized the government's approach to innovation for the 21st century. We've jump-started a clean energy revolution and unleashed the potential of precision medicine. We've partnered with the private sector and academia and launched moonshots for cancer, brain research, and solar energy. We've harnessed big data to foster social innovation and invested in STEM education and computer science so that every young person, no matter where they come from or what they look like, can reach their potential and help us win the future. That's what this is about, making sure that America is the nation that leads the world into the next frontier. And that's why I've been so committed to science and innovation, because I'll always believe that with the right investments and the brilliance and ingenuity of the American people, there's nothing we cannot do. Thanks, everybody, and have a great weekend.
Still on America, America will be going to the poll on 8th November to elect a new president following very bruising campaigns between Republican Donald Trump and Democrat Hillary Clinton. Meanwhile, the last debate created more tension between the two candidates as Donald Trump has ruled out the possibility of accepting the result of the election if he loses.
Sir, there is a tradition in this country. In fact, one of the prides of this country is the peaceful transition of power, and that no matter how hard fought a campaign is, that at the end of the campaign, that the loser concedes to the winner. Not saying that you're necessarily going to be the loser or the winner, but that the loser concedes to the winner and that the country comes together in part for the good of the country. Are you saying you're not prepared now to commit to that principle?
What I'm saying is that I will tell you at the time. I'll keep you in suspense.
Well,
okay?
Chris, let me respond to that because that's horrifying. You know, every time Donald thinks things are not going in his direction, he claims whatever it is rigged against him. I don't want to rip families apart. I don't want to be sending parents away from children. I don't want to see the deportation force that Donald has talked about.
President Obama has moved millions of people out. Nobody knows about it. Nobody talks about it. But under Obama, millions of people have been moved out of this country. They've been deported. She doesn't want to say that, but that's what's happened.
When it comes to the wall that Donald talks about building, he went to Mexico. He had a meeting with the Mexican president. Didn't even raise it. He choked.
Right now, we're getting the drugs. They're getting the cash. We need strong borders. We need we cannot give amnesty. We are going to appoint justices that will feel very strongly about the Second Amendment, that will not do damage to the Second Amendment.
That's how I see the court, and the kind of people that I would be looking to nominate to the court would be in the great tradition of standing up to the powerful, standing up on behalf of our rights as Americans. The Russian government has engaged in espionage against Americans. They have hacked American websites, American accounts of private people, of institutions. Then they have given that information to WikiLeaks for the purpose of putting it on the internet.
She doesn't like Putin because Putin has outsmarted her at every step of the way. Excuse me. Putin has outsmarted her in Syria. He's outsmarted her every step of the way.
I'm thrilled to talk about the Clinton Foundation because it is a world-renowned charity, and I am so proud of the work that it does.
It's a criminal enterprise. Saudi Arabia giving $25 million, Qatar, all of these countries. You talk about women and women's rights. So these are people that push gays off buildings. These are people that kill women and treat women horribly, and yet you take their money.
Donald thinks belittling women makes him bigger. He goes after their dignity, their self-worth, and I don't think there is a woman anywhere who doesn't know what that feels like.
I believe, Chris, that she got these people to step forward. If it wasn't, they get their 10 minutes of fame. But they were all it was all fiction. It was lies and it was fiction.
For the second straight debate, there was no handshake between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump in their final face-off. Perhaps the most significant moment came when Trump was pressed by moderator Chris Wallace about his repeated claims that the U.S. election process is rigged against him.
That you will absolutely accept the result of this election.
I will look at it at the time. I'm not looking at anything now. I'll look at it at the time. What I've seen is so bad. First of all, the media is so dishonest, and they've poisoned the minds of the voters.
Clinton said she found Trump's response horrifying and said it ran counter to U.S. political tradition.
He is denigrating, he's talking down our democracy, and I, for one, am appalled that somebody who is the nominee of one of our two major parties would take that kind of position.
Trump and Clinton also clashed over whether Russia is trying to influence the election process through cyber attacks, which U.S. intelligence officials believe is the case.
Finally, will Donald Trump admit and condemn that the Russians are doing this and make it clear that he will not have the help of Putin in this election, that he rejects Russian espionage against Americans, which he actually encouraged in the past.
When pressed, Trump said he would of course condemn Russia for the activity if it was true, but he also said China or others could be behind the cyber attacks.
I don't know Putin. He said nice things about me. If we got along well, that would be good. If Russia and the United States got along well and went after ISIS, that would be good. He has no respect for her. He has no respect for our president.
Trump was also on the defensive over allegations from at least 9 women who say he groped them sexually.
Well, first of all, those stories have been largely debunked. Those people, I don't know those people. I have a feeling how they came. I believe it was her campaign that did it.
Clinton sought to defend those making the allegations.
Donald thinks belittling women makes him bigger. He goes after their dignity, their self-worth, and I don't think there is a woman anywhere who doesn't know what that feels like.
The candidates also offered different views on Supreme Court appointments, abortion, and immigration, when Trump again called for a border wall. But Clinton said he would rip families apart. With Hillary Clinton now holding an expanded lead of about 7 percentage points, early voting is underway in more than 30 states.
And now to Nigeria. Nigerian woman has earned the trust of the community in the northeast Nigeria as she devotes her resources to feeding a community traumatized by Boko Haram activities which have been left uncared for by the government. This report looks at the singular charitable efforts of this Nigerian.
Hajia Hawa is passing out vouchers for free food. Hungry boys and girls run to her. Many of them have not eaten a real meal in days. A person who has the voucher can come to Hawa's house to get free food for 6 months. This is not an NGO. It's what Hawa describes simply as doing God's work.
I'm Hajia Hawa. I'm suffering for people who need help.
As more people come, the crowd becomes unruly. Hawa tries to leave, but it's hard to get away. Sometimes tussles break out. Hawa is used to this. Hawa's husband went missing in 2014. She suspects he was killed by Boko Haram militants. The Boko Haram conflict has killed an estimated 20,000 people and driven an estimated 1 million displaced Nigerians into Maiduguri. Wherever Hawa goes, people flock to meet her. She gives out money, food vouchers, clothes. She pays for her acts of kindness by selling plots of her father's land.
Hajia Hawa gave me a sewing machine, and she always gives me food to eat. Nobody else is helping us. Hajia Hawa is our father, mother, everything for us.
Back at home, hundreds of people are waiting. Today, they will eat yam and soup. Street beggars contribute their earnings to this communal effort and look to Hawa as their leader. She says she too is a beggar. Sometimes she goes to her wealthy friends to ask for help. She does not get help from the government. She has a roster of nearly 6,000 people who depend on her.
Even now, if I tell these people to leave me, they cannot leave me. We have been together for a long time. We love each other. No matter how we suffer, we will stay together.
A man blesses Hawa in the Kanuri tradition. We support you 100%, he says. Powerful men have neglected us, and you have come to our aid. Hawa comes home with a new bag of rice, and everyone is happy.
And with that, we conclude the news roundup for this week. Thank you for being part of the program. Tunde Alabi. Enjoy the rest of your week. Bye. Our continued efforts to reach the African and other ethnic communities in the United Kingdom with greater impacts and create the platform to hear your silent and unheard views in this hugely growing community in the United Kingdom. Our channel, Ben TV, presents to you another live current affairs television program. Our focus on the program is to review and discuss issues around the diaspora community in the UK. The program offers you that unrestricted voice on issues affecting you in the UK. Join us live every Monday at 10 a.m. to 12 noon. Another business segment of Dialogue in Diaspora, 2 to 3 p.m. every Monday. But guess what? You know you can be part of the program. Just send us an email at bentelevisionuk@gmail.com. Dialogue in Diaspora, your voice, your opinion on our TV.